Norvaisas. I'm the VP of User Experience here at Dscout, and I'm so excited to be here today to share and discuss the results of a really meaningful collaboration between Dscout and the Design Executive Council that started earlier this year. We were so excited to partner with Gordon and the Design Executive Council and everybody else involved. We're all so passionate about this industry and about empowering the next generation of great leaders, which is each and every one of you who are on this call today. The results of this partnership were a landmark report called the AI Shift. It explores our evolution through this transformational moment that we're all right smack dab in the middle of, while we're embracing so much that's new and also staying true to our core purpose and our core value. So yeah, a major animating force in so many of our conversations these days is AI, right? It affects us each in so many different ways. We're experiencing change management at a truly monumental level together. And this affects everything, right? Our approaches, our organizational structures, our skills, our mindsets, and even the way that we think of ourselves, our identities, and what we're capable of in the world. So today, no matter what your role, no matter what your level or situation, our conversation digging into this report will be full of useful insights, provocations, examples, advice, recommendations, as we all navigate this paradigm shift together. So a little bit of housekeeping here before we get into it. Please interact in the chat. In fact, say hi if you're here. I hope there's some people here. Let us know who you are, where you're at. Give us a little love in the chat. Interact with each other. And ask your questions in the Q&A at the end of the session. The session is being recorded, and we will share the recording of the session within 24 hours. Oh, it's so nice to see everybody coming in on the chat, coming from all over the world. Oh my gosh, this is so humbling and exciting. Thank you all. So yes, you already met me. I will just say I am so fascinated by this moment in time that we're in, the implications and the possibilities. I love to live in a state of fascination, and that's a very good place to be right now. I'm also so excited to be part of a field that's helping to shape this future fundamentally, and feel so lucky to be engaged in so many interesting conversations on the topic with people like the people we have assembled here today. So with that, I will hand it over to Gordon. Please introduce yourself and a little bit more about the Design Executive Council and what you want people to get out of today's webinar.
Well, hello, and so good to meet you all. It's amazing to see the chats just flying in from around the world. My name is Gordon Ching, founder and CEO of Design Executive Council. We're the premier membership network for corporate design executives. And over the past year, we've been really branching out to engage the broader industry to really understand what are the big shifts we all need to know as design and research leaders, so that we're showing up as effective in the industry. And so I'm so honored to have this opportunity to share not only what's in this room from JM, from Dave, from Julie, but also a collective of design executives serving in global companies and what those perspectives have been as we are all feeling the effects of the AI shift. But we also want to do this thoughtfully. So this research to me is so meaningful because personally for myself, as I went through this research, I felt more grounded after coming into this research. It was less of like the anxiety with
Mhm.
AI. Actually, what can I do as a leader, and also how do we guide the transition of the industry? So delighted to be here and be able to share this research today with the lovely Dscout team.
Yeah, Gordon, thank you so much. And I know you've been, when was this published? It came out a couple of months ago, is that right? Yeah. Hopefully a lot of people on the webinar here have had a chance to read through it. It really is truly excellent. And I know you've been talking to a lot of people around the industry about, what they think about the findings, and everything is changing so fast. I know that our thoughts and our perspectives are changing almost daily too. So that'll be fun to unpack that a little bit. All right, JM and then Dave, why don't you introduce yourselves? Tell us a little bit about your role and what you hope people get out of today. JM, you want to kick us off?
JM Downey, Director, Design Strategy and Research, AT&T for Enterprise Business Markets. So working on connectivity, networking, security, all that fun thing, all those fun.
Did
Um,
JM just, oh, there he goes.
and I lead a team of design researchers, and we kind of sit at product innovation, but also kind of supporting moving existing products forward. What do I hope we get out of today? I hope some optimism, some hope. I think there's increasing rhetoric around kind of everything we're going to be talking about, and I
Mm,
hope there's some tangible, like bite-sized takeaways for everybody.
great.
Great.
JM is not coming from Lumen, even though it really looks like he is, and we discussed it earlier. He's at AT&T. Dave, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, Dave Brown. I just wrapped up 9 years working at Amazon, including the last 6 in AWS. And I led the AI and ML team in AWS for the last 5. And so, my team worked on over 30 different services that work at different layers of the software stack, from lower level infrastructure to help people build models like data scientists and developers, as well as some applications at specific industry vertical level. And so I'm really interested in uh, helping being part of a community of designers who want to think and apply how do we apply AI? How do
Mhm.
we design for AI? How do we design with AI? And what does design leadership mean in this new era?
Yeah. Yeah. I love the, really different perspectives that we're bringing together today on this topic, and really excited to kind of dig into this together. And please, in the chat, you're all coming from your own perspectives, your own industries and backgrounds, like lively it up and let us know what you think, about what we're talking about. We'd love to hear it. All right, let's get into it. So the report sought to answer like a few central questions, and we're going to organize our session around them. The first one is this, what you see here, this emerging future of design and research. The next one is going to be about the kind of impact and amplification of humanity in business decision and in our work. And then we're going to wrap up with kind of new competencies, skills, mindsets, and lenses that leaders are reorienting around. So let's start with just a little tiny topic that's, will be pretty easy to answer, I think. The future of design and research through the AI shift. Much to discuss. So, Gordon, do you want to kick us off with some questions on this? Get us going?
Yeah, and just for anyone, I'm seeing some people said they haven't seen the report yet. And for those who did, I'll just remind us, we had 3 key research questions we really want to answer in this report. The first one is about what is the emerging future of design research in an AI embedded world? It's such a significant transition as we're seeing the
Yeah.
pace of change and but also the size of the change. The second was really about what's the impact AI will have on how we work, create, and even make business decisions. And I would even say decisions in our own lives. What types of roles will be amplified, redefined, or areas that might be more obsolete as the value stack changes? And where is human intelligence truly irreplaceable? And then finally, how are senior design leaders, like the ones we've assembled in this room, reorienting their practices to meet this
Yeah.
shift? So we're going to talk about competencies, mental models, and strategic lenses that are emerging to help us all lead, not just adapt in the AI era. So this very first section, both JM, Julie, and also, Dave here have led teams or lead teams through this AI shift. So kind of this first section, we wanted to talk about a framework around what are those roles that are blurring? What is feeling more automated? What type of tasks? And what does it mean to actually be strategic in this setting? So to kick it off here, there's a quote on the right-hand side that I did think framed this section quite well is, what are those things that don't bring us joy? Our brains are here to connect those dots, ask better questions, and imagine those features. We don't want to give that away. So what does that look like, JM, to kick it off here about the transition you've even seen in your teams and what type of roles are changing? What type of tasks are evolving?
Yeah, I think we we're trying to offload as much of kind of the routine as we can, right? And I love the notion of like what, only focusing on what brings you joy. But I think it creates space to kind of getting out of those repetitive tasks that kind of become energy and time sucks within our day to day, and hopefully create space for, I think, strategic thinking. Like, right, it's how do we do more with less, right? That what all executives are interested in. But I think it's also about creating a little bit of space to breathe and pause, which is so critical. if we are all strategists, if we are all really engaged in this higher level, what good can we use design for? You can't force that 8, 9, 10 hours a day every day. And I'm hoping for myself and for my team that when we're taking away some of those more kind of functional tasks, it creates space for that um, to have that pause and then execute on the strategy.
Mhm.
And I'm so curious, as you're thinking about that shift, what about the collaboration you're noticing between your stakeholders, product, engineering, data science? Like, how's that kind of changing with this context shift?
I think the tooling is introducing a lot of, we've talked a long time about kind of the democratization of research, right? And we fought for a long time to like have our seat at the table, and qual is valid. And with a lot of kind of where the tools are coming, we can now prompt our way, non-designers can now prompt our way to a working prototype that we can then have AI tools go and test. And with great power comes great responsibility. So I think it's continuing to be a part of that conversation, to be a strategic lead there, so that we don't let it kind of run away without the guardrails that we've, you know, amassed and learned through kind of our apprenticeships and our trial and error over the years of our careers.
And Dave, I'm so curious for you, I know you just departed AWS, but what a massive organization where you were leading a lot of Gen AI services and kind of products. So what have you seen in such a significant, space where AI is front and center? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think maybe one observation is just how the formation of teams is changing. I have grown up in my career where we talked about the three-legged stool, where we had product design and engineering collaborating, and with Gen AI specifically and traditional machine learning, we've got a partner in the science team as well. And you know when um, when you're moving from sort of these three nodes or three, of product design and engineering, you've got three unique connections across that. But with this fourth node, you've got these six unique connections of how the different teams collaborate. And so just the complexity of the amount of collaboration, how you organize, how you learn from each other, and the way that you run the feature development and ideation to delivery, all those things um, are sort of up for grabs right now, right?
Mhm.
I like to say that AI is coming for your task. There's a lot of noise out there on how AI is coming for your job, and frankly, the idea that one job function will overtake all the others, I just don't believe in. I think you're seeing a lot more of these blurrings of where design can use tools like Subframe and others, where you're going directly into delivering the front end code. You're finding ways where the science team is looking farther out, and they're prototyping, and pairing a designer with a scientist is a great way to build working prototypes. And so it's this really fascinating and exciting time where a lot of what we have held true as um, kind of the way that you have to do feature development and product development, I think is really up for grabs here. And so the future favors those who are willing to experiment and try new ways of working.
I can't help but think, as we probably all see in the popular discourse, there's a lot of debate about what roles are kind of emerging as we go through this. But there's also, it seems to be like a leveling field with AI allowing us to access this intelligence at such scale and access. And I think we talked a lot about what is this intelligence renaissance as we're going through this phase. So, Julie, I'm curious, even for yourself as a
Mhm.
researcher, researching a lot of other researchers, like what are you noticing in how the industry is shifting, the roles as we kind of, make sense of this moment?
Yeah, I'm so excited for researchers, particularly in this moment, because I think we've felt historically have felt, well, I'll speak for myself, a little bit boxed in, like, oh, I don't know how to do design and I don't know how to do coding. And so I have to just like stay in my lane and do research and then hope for the best and use storytelling techniques and persuasive techniques and relationships to have impact. And I think that researchers don't have to think that way anymore. Like we can be much more action oriented and much more direct in applying insights and working with teams to unlock that. And I think we've also felt very um, really kind of overwhelmed by processes. Just there's a lot of operations and a lot of process, and to kind of some of the points Dave and Jam were making too. I think we can offload some of those. Those do not bring me joy. I don't know that any researcher that gets a lot of joy from those types of tasks. So experimenting with how to offload some of those and automate some of those, and I think is really exciting. So the word that I think about a lot is like liberation, like think about how you can be liberated to do things that you felt like you weren't capable of before. And I think that really helps lead us to this more strategic influence future that we've been, it's kind of unevenly distributed. A lot of people do operate that way today, but I think a lot of us yearn and long to be more and more so. And I think this is a moment for us to really be able to achieve that.
Yeah, and I can't help but, think about that second bullet point about automated and programmatic. So, in the report, it stated design and research teams must push beyond mere acceleration. It's not just about speed. There's also about AI to unlock more profound insights, ensure solutions genuinely serve human needs. As Janaki Kumar emphasized, she's chief design officer for Global Bank at JP Morgan, intuition-led research and the human capacity to see around corners. And in the report, we'll see there are some examples of how she helped see around corners that led to innovation. So I'm curious for, the three panelists here, like how have you balanced kind of the automation side of data gathering, analysis, with then the need for cultivating and leveraging those intuitive insights in your teams?
That's such a good question.
Small, not loaded at all. I think the ability to just handle the raw amount of data is huge, right? I mean, that's been, I think, probably the biggest boon for us, right? Even if we're doing live sessions and in workshops, right? We can process that in real time. And I think that's been what really kind of frees up some of that space. But I think, yeah, I think overall kind of making that efficiency play has been really important for us.
Yeah, yeah. I was, building on that. To be realistic, like I think we're not there yet. I think it's AI isn't magic. I don't know. It takes a lot of doing to figure out how to automate some tasks and what's the right tool to use and how do you operationalize that. And so I think we're still in that phase of experimenting with a lot of that. And then, of course, peeling off some resources and some teams to be moving into more strategic directions at the same time. So I think, at least speaking for myself and my team, we're kind of parallel pathing that.
I I think it's worth calling out too the difference between traditional machine learning
Yeah.
experiences and Gen AI. And so, I mean, what we saw, you know, 3 years ago, where you're using traditional machine learning, and in that flow, you started with data, right? And there was a lot of emphasis on how do you collect and prepare data, and then you build a model around that, and then you use that model in a product. And you saw that in a lot of examples like recommendation systems or image detection or things like that. And the more data that was collected, the better those systems became. And I think there was definitely a time where there was, and there continues to be some discussion around like how does the kind of traditional user research function interplay with the data scientist to ensure that the data that we collect and prepare is used in an ethical and responsible way. And that's absolutely true. With Gen AI, we're using these large models or diffusion models. And so now when you're building a product, you can actually start with that product experience, right? You don't start with the data and then the model into the product. It's inverted. And you can start with the product. And you can build a working prototype or your vision, and you can move really quickly. And then if it's successful, you want to think about how do you add more data so you get some type of flywheel into that experience, right? So you might start with using standard off-the-shelf APIs from different model providers. And then if you find product market fit, then you can start to say, how are we going to personalize this experience? What is unique data that our organization has? How do we connect it to a RAG system? How do we connect to the prompt management system? And so you move from data to the model to the product to the product, the data. And then if that's successful, maybe you start to prioritize and customize your own unique model, or you combine different models together. And so because the way software is being built, it actually inverts the way that design and research as a function needs to provide value to the business, right? And so I think leaders and designers are going to earn a lot of trust with their stakeholders when they recognize that shift, and then they lean into doing the right activities at the right time of that cycle. And so I think up front, you're just going to be a lot more, you're going to explore a lot of different concepts, a lot of different ideas, and then narrow from that.
Yeah. And I think there's one, segment in that third bullet point that, Dave, as you're highlighting, there's a transition of, even the timing, the sequencing. But I think one thing that helped me better understand is we're kind of moving from an output focused world to an input focus because of these systems. And I know in the next section, we'll cover more about what that probabilistic system means, for you, Dave. But as we think about the word strategic, like Dave, I think you're actually starting to peel the onion a little bit about that timing, that importance. So in the report, we found that, for many businesses, this means leveraging design and research earlier to guide AI development towards more genuine market needs and serve user values. And what is that true differentiation for that company, right? And so practitioners, what does that actually mean when we're saying it demands a proactive stance to communicate, to understand how these systems actually get developed? And so do you have any further examples? Julie, JM, I think Dave highlighted a little bit about moving towards the input level, not just the outputs.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of the researchers on my team, I think at least one of whom I saw in the chat, are working directly with our AI engineers and our data scientists, not really with product people or designers. They are not testing prototypes. They are testing models. They are bringing an ethical framework to the development of our products here. And it's really, really novel. And it's very much a tightrope act. Like they're developing the ways of working together as they go. There really is no blueprint for it. And it's really exciting. And the impact that research has had on the development of our AI products and features here at Dscout is like, it's just very different from the impact that we have in traditional product development. So what you were saying, Dave, really, really resonated. Like that's, if you're a researcher on the call, and you're working in an organization with data science, like go make friends with them, know your AI engineers and just get super involved, learn as much as you can about models and model evaluation and bring your practices into that. I think there's so much appetite for that right now. And that's completely new and very exciting.
There's absolutely a huge business need. When you had traditional machine learning, you had clear metrics and ground truth data, right? You knew something, whether it was a hot dog or not a hot dog, right? And so you could compare to that ground truth data. With a lot of these GenAI systems, or when you're designing for agents, the science and the engineers will have metrics, time to first token, the latency, et cetera. And this is kind of more akin to traditional development telemetry. But that whole unlock of experience metrics and how humans are actually interacting with that system, a lot of that is still pretty early. And so I think this is a space where research and design can really lean in and help the business make sense, not of how did the model respond, but how did the end user interact based off of that response? What were the follow-up questions? What were the mental models of how the user understood whether they were interacting with a probabilistic or deterministic system? And those areas are a lot murkier right now, and the very hard metrics around that are still pretty early on the science side. And so having designers and researchers really partner there, it can provide incredible value to the business.
Yeah.
Dave, do you want to just expand a little bit about probabilistic system? I think that's such a core paradigm shift
Yeah.
in this
And I
conversation.
segued us into our next section
Yeah.
here. I thought
Oh,
that
sure.
was, yeah, perfect segue.
Well, if you think of the last couple of decades, we've been building in this world of deterministic rules-based software, right? And in that world, the rules were known. Everyone could kind of stay in their lane. Designers could define and design for all the different states that an end user may find themselves in. User researchers could run studies. We could learn how users responded to those different states. In engineering, we could measure success in these very controlled environments and release features to small cohorts of customers, and then you would roll things out. And we had a whole set of mechanisms to help drive that scale, right? We created design patterns and design systems so we would have this consistency and this reliability. But the probabilistic nature of AI means that an application's runtime experience can really significantly diverge from what maybe we planned, right? And so we're moving from deterministic flows to probabilistic experiences. I like to say we're kind of moving from a single golden path to a world where every experience is an edge case. And so I think our roles are shifting, and you need to think much more sort of at a platform level, um, and in a way that how do you drive systems and be a systems thinker to manage all of that complexity. So you got to think about how things are adapting in real time. How do you personalize the experiences? How do you design experiences that remain resilient under stress? Where do you need to introduce friction to help alert the user that this may not be the right path for them to going through, right? Where we've for decades been said, the role of design is to help simplify and reduce friction. And so a lot of these things kind of are inverted in this world of probabilistic experiences.
Yeah. And I can't imagine, with this shift, it means, and that quote on the right is, I found really helpful. Christina Valerie, Chief Designer of the Cigna Group, she says, if we automate the tactical, what does that make room for? That's the real opportunity to feel more, to create more, to reassemble the world around us. And I think about, Julie, JM, I'm curious in your worlds is, as you're learning to work with AI, have you actually found that confidence to fully automate? Or like, where is that really at? Because I feel that's still like in flux with experimentation. I'm seeing a lot in the chat room as well, but it's still at an experimental phase. So as team leaders as well, like what are you seeing with really the confidence around automation?
I think for me, it's still a test but
Hmm.
verify, not a trust but verify, right? And I think that's also how you start to build the confidence, not only within your teams, but within, we've brought up trust, and that's such a critical component of what we're doing. And where we're trying to go as a design and research arm, maybe a little more accelerated than where our product teams are, and how do we kind of bridge that gap and um, yeah, bring them along the journey with us, right? I think that's really critical for us.
One thing that hasn't changed is that a very durable strategy is to start with the end user, the end customer experience, and sort of work backwards from that. And so it obviously depends on the domain of what you're building and what's the level of accuracy and latency and cost and all those trade-offs when you're building these experiences. Are you okay with 90% confidence in this use case at this price performance trade-off, or do you need to spend 10x more to get it up to 95%? So um, having designers and researchers understand that tech stack and what some of those trade-offs are around costs, latency, accuracy, connecting to different systems, will 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 make you a partner in working with your business stakeholders to provide really pragmatic and tangible trade-offs, right? And I think that's what we've always seen work well with design and research is presenting certainly a recommendation, but also the trade-offs across those experiences.
I'm thinking of it maybe from a little bit of a different perspective and adjacent perspective of like, we're developing tools to help researchers and designers and other people automate a little bit of their work so that they can, do so it gets a little bit meta, but I think a lot about affordances in interfaces that are using AI, and this idea of the judgment, intuition, and taste, and really encouraging my team to, while we're creating tools that help automate and help up level teams, that we're also bringing our own intuition and taste into it and creating experiences that are delightful and have really thoughtful affordances throughout the experience so that they're tools that people want to use, right? They're not just efficiency tools and you can do more with less and do things faster and be more strategic and have more impact, but we should feel things while we're using them, and we should be creating products that help people feel things too. So I don't know. I think a lot about that in this category.
Yeah. And one additional point of, research and insight here was I think leaders overwhelmingly are all in about AI, right? And then there's the team level. So I'm curious for, the three of you, where would you say you and your teams are practically and emotionally in accepting AI as a trusted team? And I think that's such an interesting dimension of like who feels more in control or, capable of driving this forward. So curious to hear any thoughts on that dimension of team.
Well, if there's somebody on my team in here, and I know there is, hi Laurel. What do you think? I'd love your answer to that question. I don't know. I think people feel pretty empowered, but also tentative. Like, is AI a trusted teammate for us? No, it's a potential trusted teammate. To JM's point about trust, it's like, I don't know. I think so. Maybe we're also very skeptical people. We're very critical thinkers, and you know, researchers, really deep researchers, aren't the people who are going to just like take an AI output and run with it and give it to your stakeholders. Like, there's a lot of trust but verify going on right now.
And I see some frustration. I mean, not necessarily from the research side of our teams, but the design side of our teams. There's so much in the world right now that maybe our security office or firewall won't necessarily let us explore and play with. And kind of, you can't like, I feel like they're not able to push the boundaries, right? But I think it's also like, okay, so we have our own walled off instances and we have what has been afforded to us. So like what can you do within kind of those design constraints?
I, I see a lot, at the kind of executive level, both design and product engineering, and you see a lot of leaders saying we've got to get our teams to use AI and learn AI and make this big shift. But I think at the individual level, there's a lot of designers and researchers saying like, what does that mean pragmatically for me? Like, what do you want me to do? What new tools should I be using? Are we adding additional steps to our existing processes, or are you saying should reinvent some of our existing processes in the ways that we build? And I think we're just in that murky phase right now. I guess the people that I've seen be the most successful, probably no surprise, are those that are most curious. Those who just kind of want to jump in, and the barriers to building have just changed so dramatically. There's so much information out there that you really need as an individual to kind of like curate your sources, so you don't ping pong across a million LinkedIn articles and YouTube videos every day, and start breaking down into a specific project, whether that's a side project or something in your day-to-day work where you can start to apply this. And I'm a really big believer in the learn by doing approach. In a world where in a phase like this where things are shifting so dramatically, you've got to be building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this, Julie, segues us really well to actually the next section,
Yes.
because I think with all these shifts, I think oftentimes the mindset is actually the basis of how we then become more effective in this environment, right? And so Janicki on the right has a quote to kind of prompt this section. You got to be T-shaped. We've all heard that before, but what does that really mean? If you want a seat at this table, you can't just be a researcher's researcher. So we're going to unpack what that is. I'm looking for someone who can stand up to stakeholders and advocate for what's right. So we're going to unpack what it means to be that strategic builder. What does it mean to be not just a researcher's researchers? Julie, I'm actually really curious to hear from you. Like, what does it mean to not just be a researcher's researcher?
Oh my gosh. I think it's kind of ties back a little bit to what I was saying earlier about like staying in your lane, right? Like you're really focused on your methods and the rigor of your methods and the logic and rationale of your evidence that you're presenting in a very organized fashion. All those things are very, very important. But they are, and this is a trend that isn't necessarily tethered to AI, but it's something we've been talking about for a long time. You have to be applying your skill set to a purpose, right? To a business problem, to solving problems for your stakeholders, solving problems for your organization. Um, uh, you know, Nobody cares about your methods, right? Like that's the thing. And I think that's true even more so now than it has been. So yeah.
Dave?
Yeah. I mean, in this moment of where we are in June of 2025, I think it's, those that are leaning in and um, being proactive and collaborating with researchers and scientists. Um,
Yeah.
that's the place to start. And so those types of things look like, hey, what are the new interaction patterns that we could introduce in this experience that are beyond sort of a vanilla chat experience that help our end users pull in the right context from their previous conversations or the right, so very sort of like hands-on design things help build that trust with the team. Um, and then I think a little bit farther out, like going back to if it's true that we're going to be moving to much more probabilistic experiences, then we're going to be having, each of these experiences is going to be personalized at the individual level. And so what that means is the output from a researcher or designer is not a report or a study that informs what we build, but rather the very system itself, right? And so the proverbial sort of seat at the table will be a hot seat where you are now accountable to the business metrics of did you increase conversion? What is the very tangible business outcomes of how are you influencing this system, right? And so I think that's going to take some time, and the platforms need to mature for us to get there. But that's where I think things will be happening. And so sort of be careful what you ask for when you're fighting for the seat at the table. It's going to happen pretty quick. Because you as a designer or researcher can now actually influence and manage that system at scale, right? You're not reliant on science or engineering to do that because the models are doing that.
Being held accountable to these KPIs is terrifying for a qual researcher, but I love that point, and I think it's also we have to get out of our swim lane. We've created the swim lane, but part of what this allows us to do is explore more faster as well, right? We're not, with our organization, we're able to get a lot closer to our product team, right? And we can explore a lot of their ideas, and something that would have taken a lot of time, we can like explore 12 different paths at once, right? So now we're becoming that strategic partner. We're helping to create or kill the idea that didn't have any legs to move forward on. And I think that's how we start to show up, and just to champion also, like, we are systems level thinkers, and it's a privilege that I take for granted sometimes, is that we have the end-to-end purview of the user experience, where so many of our partners are still embedded in these very kind of deep areas of expertise, and it goes on to the next piece of the puzzle. We can help bring that visibility into the experience for them.
Yeah.
You know, and JM, you do say something in the report, which is we're thinking about what does it mean to go from research precision to pattern and persuasion. And I think that's such an important shift of, when you get into that accountability zone, it's like, how are you then influencing decision making through better inputs? And I imagine with AI, I'm hoping more people actually arrive at more options, more alternatives that have been explored so you can better understand those kind of trade-offs.
Mhm.
I'm so curious, for this group here, is like when we're thinking about this mindset shift, how would you kind of characterize your own feelings over the last 2 years as you've learned to work with AI, you're now seeing it being used and experimented in your teams? What have you found as like a critical mindset shift for yourself, the three of you? And we'll come back to you, Julie, first.
Oh gosh, I was hoping you weren't going to do that. I've had to just be a lot more open-minded about my relationship with technology. I feel like I've always kind of held it at a bit of an arm's length, and that was other people's responsibility. And I learned to bring business needs closer and all of that, but technology still felt a little bit like that's somebody else's purview. I cannot understand it. That's not how my brain works. And I've personally had to get a lot more comfortable with that, which is a journey for sure. But I love being on a journey. For my team, and I've been doing this for years, but more than ever emphasizing courage and creating space for people to cultivate their own courage and clarity and conviction. Like that is your job. You have to be able to show up that way. Um, we can't hide behind, I think, that what Jan was just saying too, we can't hide behind our methods and we can't hide behind our boundaries anymore. And that's exciting, but also kind of terrifying. So courage.
I think initially, like as I had some skepticism, maybe some cynicism, right? I was like, oh, we're going from the democratization of research to the commoditization. And
Mm,
I was like, well, not everybody can be a researcher, nor should they, right? And where do we sit? I'm like, I don't want to put us in the ivory tower, and bestowing what's right and wrong. But I think it also, I had to spur myself to be like, if I wait for perfect, if I wait for a very clear picture of what all this means, it's just pure stagnation. So showing up, trying, doing little bit by little bit, right? Even if you want to take that healthy, guarded kind of
mhm.
skepticism, it is test, try and test is going to be the path forward. Test,
Yeah, I
learn.
think just recognizing the moment that we're in and the pressure that our other stakeholders are under and that the business is under, and being very pragmatic in those moments of moving fast. Maybe we like to say we move forward when we've got 80% certainty in something. Maybe that's even changing a little bit more, but we're moving fast and we're responding to the needs of the business. I think that's just really foundational and worth kind of revisiting. It's a very durable truth, and as a design leader, I think the other thing is it is absolutely vital that designers and researchers learn this new software development stack. And there's a new set of
Mhm.
ways of working and with GenAI that you just have to learn. It's kind of akin to, a designer would know that they need to treat the front end a little bit differently if you had a client side error versus a server side error, right? There's little nuances in how you design for that. And with GenAI or traditional machine learning,
Mhm.
the actual UI layer needs to change. And what that means is, as a designer, to build great experiences and research to inform that, you have to understand, vector storage, and you have to understand RAG systems and prompt management, and what are the different components that are informing an agentic experience. There is so much more to building a great end user application that uses AI beyond simply calling a model and getting that model response, right? And so being someone who can understand that software stack and then translate it into a way that makes really great human experiences, um, that's how you're going to sort of elevate what the role of design and research does for building this new set of experiences at that application layer. And it's a really exciting time. It reminds me of the shift to mobile, right? And what that was like. But there's a whole new world of kind of design patterns and experiences that can be built today.
Dave, that sounds terrifying and intimidating. But I take it as, I don't know if this is a good metaphor, right? But like when you travel internationally and you try to speak a little bit of the language, kind of the credibility that you earn. So like being able to speak even at the level that you're able to understand kind of what's going on in the back end, it opens up doors. It shows kinds of your engineering partners that I don't know it all. That's your expertise, but I understand how the pieces start to fit together, right? And it just keeps opening and you'll dig in more. I just call that out because I think it can be very intimidating to say, well, now I have to understand the entire language of engineering and architecture, and oh boy.
Well, I think one thing, Julie, you asked me at the beginning of this, also, like, what are you hearing from other design executives navigating this era? And I think one really timely insight I found in our latest podcast episode on the Design Executive podcast, Suzanne Pelican, she's VP UX at Google. She was like, Gordon, I don't have to keep up with AI, like to keep pace with every single thing. But me as a design leader, I bring that clarity around strategic use cases, that human context to really know how to help the business know where to play and where to win, right? And so I think about, like, certainly there is a lot of technical literacy that has to be learned so we know how to be those input leaders, not just delivering on outputs. But there's also a deeper understanding of, like, where are we truly purposeful and meaningful as designers and researchers? And it always comes back to some of the core fundamentals of our practice. So I kept that in my head as I was thinking about, like, there's so much to learn in AI,
Yeah.
but there's also golden areas where we contribute with that kind of power, right? And so I think a lot about that as we lead into maybe the next section in the last few minutes here. So we developed this framework. Actually, in the report was not planned. It was a very last minute iteration because we heard something that really stuck out to me is Janaki Kumar at JP Morgan. She was sharing how, Gordon, I have to continually think about what is the way we earn our permission to play. And I think about some of these leaders who've been at it for 2 to 3 decades. They've seen all these technology shifts and they continue to earn that right to play. So how are they thinking about it? So this framework came about as we were kind of sense making around, yes, we heard all these insights, but like at a practical level, how do we make sure we're strategic and we're effective? And so on the bottom right of this quadrant is kind of where we're trying to point people's attention to is what are those quick wins that are immediately focusable for GenAI acceleration, lower barriers to entry, and have tangible income. So low complexity, high impact. What are some of those opportunity areas before we shift to areas of higher complexity and higher impact around invest for long-term impact? So think about what are those higher barrier areas that are transformative but take much more time and effort, but they are more durable because they're differentiated. So curious to hear from the three of you, what have you kind of seen, felt in your own worlds when it comes to what are those quick wins and maybe even some ladders to longer term kind of transformative impacts?
I think just maybe we'll start on the product building side. I'll give some examples from my time at AWS. We launched a new service about 2 years ago called Amazon Bedrock. And that was a 0 to 1 brand new service. And it's now over $1 billion of revenue a year. And through that time, we launched hundreds of features. And it was incredibly fast paced. And what you find is that in a space like this, when things are moving so quickly, I really needed to learn and sort of pare back my instinct of wanting to go slower and make things more perfect, and realizing the moment that we're in, we've got to get something out there to market and really respond to customer needs. And so, everyone is looking to adopt different tools at every layer of the software stack now. And so I think it's critical that you have some good mechanisms in place already of how you're getting feedback from customers, right? That could be through, all the great tools that Dscouts provide. It could be, an enterprise, talking to your solution architects or the account executives or direct end customers, but building on top of those mechanisms that you already have and just moving really, really quickly and being very nimble. And so, I think the future just favors those who are very fast and responsive to building.
Yeah. I mean, here at Dscout, I think over the last year or so, our approach has been to like really key in on some of the, I guess I would say, low-hanging fruit, right? That research can automate, can do more easily. Things like, analysis tools and some Q&A tools and things like that, things that are really, really cool, but just help clear the decks for researchers a little bit. So these were more, I would say, more obvious areas of development. And we started to practice, like, how do we build these tools? What are our internal ways of doing this? How quickly can we do it? What do we need to learn? How are people adopting it? There was just so much for us to adjust to and learn internally and externally with our users. And now, literally, I'm here in Chicago at our headquarters in the midst of days of planning to move to that next quadrant of like, okay, what are the more strategic areas that we want to move into? What is the future? And that is very much a design and research-led conversation that's happening right now as I sit with you today. So, yeah, we're literally in the middle of that.
And I would just add, it's for me, it's been a little bit treating my business partners as one of the key users as well, right? As they're using AI to code, as we're using that to develop really quick product requirements, how can we engage them to, use these tools to test it out, to get that feedback quicker, to make it kind of less of that waterfall feel that we might be used to.
Yeah. Yeah, totally, totally. Well, I think we are running out of time, believe it or not, Gordon, and crew. So I'm going to land on this last slide that we have. Maybe you can chat about it a little bit, Gordon, and I'm pulling together some questions from the Q&A. So hopefully we'll have a chance to get to a couple of those.
Yeah, so these are some key takeaways that were derived from the report, and I want to make sure we also get time for the Q&As. But one, there's a lot here, and each one probably could be its own webinar. But I think one that sticks out to me, and I'm curious to what sticks out for the three of you, is for me was that design for elasticity. I think we talk a lot about excellence and effectiveness, but what is elasticity? It was like that adaptive mindset, that ability to flex and move and be useful in multiple more situations than we're traditionally used to because the stack is moving. And so that was a standout for me. I'm curious to what were the standouts for you three?
I think this number two, operationalized curiosity and foresight. This is something I've been thinking a lot about as a design leader, how our roles are going to change. You're moving sort of from this scarcity mindset where we've been for a lot of decades. We don't have enough time or enough people to do all the features. The reality is a lot of the times we don't do research is not because the business doesn't value it, is that it doesn't fit into the timelines that we have, right? And so as that changes, the cost of building a prototype, the cost of running a user research study is just going to dramatically fall. And we're also going to have many, many more experiences because they're going to be personalized. And so as a design leader, you're sort of moving from this mindset of scarcity to this mindset of abundance. And how do you manage complexity? And how do you say yes to everything and still sort of keep the wheels on the bus? And so that's going to be a really tough transition for some people. And I think it's probably going to be like the arc of my career as well.
I also get a little excited that this is like the renaissance of the design generalists, right? And I see a lot of kind of business acumen language in here, and it's what I've spoken to a bit too, but like, if we have those core skill sets, what can we do to, operationalized influence to help push the business forward, with kind of that core skill set we bring as human-centered designers and researchers.
Yeah, I love that. I will just quickly say on the point of number one, repositioning from insight to influence. Insights are transactional, and influence is a practice. Influence is a very difficult thing. It's not just a word you say and then you do it. You have to really cultivate a practice of influence. All right, and with that, I'm gonna just turn to a few questions here. All right, you ready, guys? Where's the one I was looking for? What about the things that bring us joy, but our leaders say it's cheaper to do with AI? What's the pushback for that?
It's gonna be a tough one.
Well, I want the context, right? That's always what I'm going to argue for. It, I think for me, it's hopefully within your team creating that space that we talked about, right? Like I can do synthesis really fast, but if I try to condense it into more than 2 days, like I know I'm not giving it its due diligence. So hopefully, if there are those kind of tasks that are, repetitive or could be automated, whatever it is, you can
Right.
make a case for that
Like somebody
allowing
just put in the chat, I have to confess, I get a lot of joy out of reading hundreds of user feedback quotes.
make the case that's how you do your synthesis, right? I mean, you are
I know, I
forging those
know,
connections.
I know. Yeah, interesting.
I think I think we're also looking around because it's a tough question to answer. It kind of comes back to the whole like, what is your role? What is your purpose? What's your why? And I think a lot of us got into this field because we really believed deeply in this idea of like building human connection, right? Creating great experiences that have more meaningful human connection. Um, and so I'm a little more flexible on what the specific tasks or tactical steps are, and just sort of recognize that those are going to change over my career. Um, but if you can sort of anchor yourself on that North Star of providing value to end users and providing value to the business, at the end of the day, this is a job, right? And so find the things that you can be uniquely suited that align with those passions, but sort of maybe anchor a little bit more on the bigger
Yeah.
why you're doing this, rather than anchoring on the specific tasks and steps that you do today.
Yeah, and experiment with how maybe AI tools can help you bring more joy to that, or spread the joy of that you have. So, all right, I want to end on a really important question that I think is on a lot of people's minds. We see a shift in the role of researchers being critical thinkers, moving away from the more tactical tasks. But in my experience, most junior roles were more tactical. We did the operational task until we managed to go beyond that. And those are roles that might not be needed anymore. How do you see the future of junior researchers joining the field? Dave, you want to start with that one? And I guess that would go for designers as well. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think about this a lot. I came up in a time where I worked at a lot of different agencies, and I think working at different agencies is a great way to start your career because you get so many different reps, right? You see so many different types of projects and all that. And so I think a lot about how do people get started in this field. In a moment of big transition like this, the the best long-term thing you could do is try to learn the new tools so that you can leapfrog, right? Because a year from now, or as a hiring manager, you know, I'm going to be wanting someone who's really demonstrated that they're building and using these new tools. They're open to discovery. And so in a way, maybe you don't need to spend all the decades sort of learning how things have always been done and reinforcing
Yeah.
that. Obviously, you need to sort of learn it. It's sort of like playing jazz, right? Like you got to learn the scale so you can, improvise. Um, so there's an element of that, but I would say if you're young, it's kind of like you got nothing to lose here. Learn the new tools. You don't have to sort of abide by these really strict lines of this is what a designer does, this is what a researcher does, this is what a front engineer does, a PM.
Right.
So learn the new tools, experiment, build side projects, have fun with it.
Yeah, back to curiosity and action and experimentation. Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, go ahead, JM, and then we'll have to wrap up.
remember that, there's the human element that we didn't talk about that's so critical to interpreting all of this, right? And that is not going to be replaced. The judgment, the connections, the context. So again, I champion being a generalist, but I don't forget the humanity that it's still critical to make the through line of all this.
I think that's a wonderful spot to end. Don't you, Gordon?
I agree.
Well, thank you all. Please join me in thanking JM and Dave and Gordon for joining us today. We have a couple QR codes here, one to learn more about Dscout, one to subscribe to the Design Executive Council news. There's a lot of really cool stuff they're cooking up that if you were interested in this, you will definitely be interested in that. And thank you all so much for joining and keeping the chat lively. There's nothing as gratifying as seeing people engaging in the chat while you're having a great conversation like this. So thank you all so much. And we hope to see you at the next Dscout and Design Executive Council webinar.
All right.
Have a
Well,
great day. Bye-bye.
bye, everyone.